Hello, everyone. Welcome to Transform Now. I'm Brad Hairston.
I'm Michael Marchuk.
And this is the weekly pulse check, taking a look at what's happened in the news around automation and AI. And Michael, we've got 5 articles going to put you to the test today.
5 articles. That means lots of stuff has happened.
That's right. So let's jump right in. So the first 2 articles deal with the ever-present tariff issue, which is dominating the news. The first one comes to us from Time magazine. It's titled, "Trump Wants Tariffs to Bring Back U.S. Jobs. They Might Speed Up AI and Automation Instead." So this, of course, is referring to the fact that tariffs could potentially increase the incentive for companies to automate labor entirely. What's your take on this article, Michael?
So, we've seen this over the past several decades. Think of the automotive industry moving from human-led construction of automobiles to literally now robots building cars autonomously. They just run the factory pretty much on their own. So we've seen the transition in the auto industry. We know that it can happen. I think what this is really referring to is the reality is that the reason why we've offshored or outsourced from a U.S. perspective all of this manufacturing and all these other activities is because there was cheaper labor elsewhere. And so by doing so, U.S. companies could then create more products with less cost and higher margins, even though they have to ship it halfway around the world.
Right.
It was still cheaper to do that based on the labor costs. And what this is really saying is that if we have some tariffs that make it more difficult for U.S. companies to justify that outsourcing of the labor elsewhere, because now the costs of those goods coming from other countries now could exceed what we could produce them for in the United States, then you would see a influx of people here in the United States jumping on the bandwagon and creating a whole bunch of manufacturing firms overnight to satisfy all our desires. The reality is that's probably not going to happen, certainly not going to happen anytime soon. But what it does look at, you start looking at our labor costs. And as we've seen with other automation angles, automation ends up being a much, much less expensive way to create output than using humans. There's just a very different way you have to go about it. Your entire organization and everything you do has to be focused around how you manage that output. Now, as we've seen now with the rise of these humanoid robots from a number of different manufacturers, this is becoming more and more a potential for manufacturers to be able to do that. Now, we thought about, the whole industry of automotive industry is very capital intensive. As they're building out these things, we're going to see the same issue with any other manufacturer. It'll be capital intensive to be able to buy these robots to be able to make all the materials that we want them to make. I don't know if this is going to happen or not, just because it's such a big undertaking, but it certainly could lean towards that way as we go.
Yeah. Now, the first time Trump was in the presidency, he did put some tariffs in place. It did not drive a significant AI boom or automation boom, but experts are quick to point out, as the article mentions, that there have been so much improvements in AI in the last 5, 6, 7 years that this time it truly...
How about the past 5 or 6 days?
Yes, good point. Good point. So perhaps we'll see it happen this time. Time will tell. Okay, well, let's move on to the second one that also relates to tariffs. This is from New York Times. The article's titled, "China Has an Army of Robots on Its Side in the Tariff War." Now, this one takes us from AI-enabled digital robots to AI-enabled industrial robots. And it talks about the fact that in China, factories are being automated at breakneck speed to keep the cost of manufacturing down and thus keep the price of their exports lower. So it's a way of playing, I guess, offense or maybe defense in the light of what's happening with these tariffs. And it also says China currently is more automated in their factories than the US, Germany, and Japan. Only South Korea and Singapore are more automated than the factories in China. So what do you think about that, Michael?
Well, I see this as I want to say East versus West mentality. Because as you mentioned, the U.S. and German and what these are folks that have been at it for a while. I mean, Japan has been doing this for a while too. They've had to because of their workforce. But I think we're going to see the same thing in Germany and in the United States, and that's that it's going to be very difficult to come by workers who are skilled and want to work in a factory to produce things.
Yeah.
And while the Chinese economy has been growing, and they still have a dearth of, or a ton of these folks who are able to go and work within factories and want to move from a rural lifestyle to a factory lifestyle, which gives them better, cost of living, or better living lifestyle. They're going to run to a point where we're going to see the same kind of break-even piece, where there's such a heavy capital cost involved with creating more automation, while you're able to create potentially more output with lesser cost over time. There is a significant upfront cost to be able to do that. So I'm not sure where that's going to happen in particular in China, but across all of the manufacturing that's happening globally, I foresee that we are going to see more and more robotics within every kind of manufacturing, not just the plants that are doing things that we expect them to do, but like anything that makes anything is going to have not only the machinery that currently runs on, but also robots to feed the machinery, robots to package things, robots to do things that humans are currently doing, simply because it's difficult to find those workers in the Western world who are willing to do that kind of work.
Right. Now, China is not just being driven by the U.S. and what they're doing. The article also points out that they're experiencing new trade barriers from the European Union and also developing countries like Brazil and India, Turkey and Thailand. So China has a lot of motivation to do some things differently.
Yeah, we've gone from an open kind of economy across the globalized economy to more of a protectionist economies across every one of the countries that we've just mentioned. So the pendulum is going to swing both, each way. We're going to have this protectionism for a while, and I think it's going to swing more global again. It's just the way the economies work. And again, given the current demographics, we're going to have to see how this really impacts us, because we didn't have these issues before as these pendulums were swinging.
As long as my 401k doesn't dissolve into dust, I'm okay with it.
I can't promise that.
Okay, the third article, this pivots a bit. It's an interesting piece from The Atlantic. It's called the Gen Z Lifestyle Subsidy. I just had a future of work expert on the podcast, and she gave some pretty interesting insights on Gen Z workers. As you know, Michael, they now hold a larger percentage of jobs in the market than baby boomers do. So a lot of attention is being paid to them, and rightfully so. The article talks about the fact that whereas the millennials were the generation that cared about Uber and DoorDash, the Gen Zers are actually embracing AI. So what did you think about it?
So I took a slightly different opinion on this article based on what they were talking about. And to me, the way I read it and read into it was as they were describing here, the millennials in the 2010 era, Uber came out and was giving free rides and was kind of helping people understand how this kind of whole paradigm shift would work with ride sharing. And now here we are in 2025, and ride sharing is definitely a thing, and people are very used to grabbing an Uber or grabbing a Lyft to get around. It's just kind of a normalized thing. And some of that had to be provided, some kind of incentives provided for people to understand how to engage with or operate with this new kind of paradigm shift. So by giving away those rides, those millennials start finding out, well, this is actually very convenient. I can really work with this. And then the people who are driving, also generally millennials, are thinking, this is wonderful. I get to make some extra gig economy cash to keep me going and pay for my car. So they started seeing this kind of really interesting dynamic play out with this new way of working. When we start looking at the Gen Z version of that, we're seeing the same type of thing with ChatGPT or others like it, where it's almost like a drug dealer. I'm going to give you a little bit of free stuff here to get you hooked,
Right.
and to show you what it's like, and to really get you to enjoy the feeling of having AI power all of your stuff, right? To the point where it'll be very normal and natural to be spending a good amount of money to be able to leverage AI as we look towards the future. It'll be very natural. It'll be normalized, just like ride sharing is now. So I think that's how I read the article is coming in from this idea that there was, with each of these generations, there's a new paradigm shift that was going on. And in order to sort of entice that generation to really grab hold of it, providing for free or for discounted access, they were able to get this new paradigm kind of baked into the way they think.
Yeah. It was interesting to see the LLM providers coming at the kids in school right now and offering them a free subscription.
Hey kids, do you want ChatGPT? Hey kids.
And they put the message out there, good luck with finals. It's like, oh, come and let us help you with your studying and your term papers and what have you. But they clearly have a pretty eager audience there that they're capitalizing on. Okay, interesting stuff. Well, let's move on. Article 4 is from Tech Monitor, and it's titled, Agentic AI has arrived. Companies are still struggling to find out what it can do. Now, this is referring to quite a bit to some research by Cloudera that found that agentic AI has truly taken off. In fact, they did a survey and they found 57% of the respondents said they had started implementing agents just within the last 2 years. And almost all the people that they surveyed said they plan to expand their use of agents going forward. Now, we conducted our own survey not so long ago, and our percentage was much lower. We showed 29% of companies surveyed have waded into the agentic pool, and 44% plan to do so in the coming year. So a little bit of disparity between what we see and what Cloudera is reporting. I guess the more important thing to me was they found that 37% of the companies that they surveyed said that they were having a really tough time integrating agents into their workflows. In fact, the quote was extremely challenging. So what did you think about all that, Michael?
Well, I look back at this and think about, I go back to the RPA days where we had the same arguments happening during the initial adoption. And the reality is that once people started understanding and started getting more used to the way that automation worked, RPA became very, very integrated with workflows and whatnot. So I do see that this is a potential that agentic is going to head that way, at that direction. But what you mentioned was certainly the idea of, well, where do we find this right now? Are they really eager to do it? They're not really eager right now. And there's some reasons why. Certainly the whole concept of the hallucinations and other things, which is continuing to be an issue across corporate engagement, as we've seen other stories that we've covered related to LLMs that are doing things they shouldn't do.
Yeah.
In fact, the article is mentioned this, I thought was very interesting. They were saying it's crystal clear that when it comes to using agentic in finance, you want to create very specific lockdown things with these LLMs. I'm kind of summarizing some of these things. Because finance is a pretty black and white thing.
Yeah.
Right? You don't want it to guess. You don't want to be doing generic things or figuring out how to do accounting, right? That's not something we do. So I believe we're going to see sort of a hybrid workflow kind of concept where we take and leverage agentic components where they're best suited and leverage traditional automation and other kinds of automation like RPA to support places where you need that the auditability, audit trails to go through, and you want a really deterministic outcome for the automations. So they, I thought it was very interesting. The other thing too is they mentioned agentic AI is not going to solve world hunger, but it's very good for use cases like inspecting insurance claims, resolving service issues, and they can work really well in those kind of areas. They also connected with a report from McKinsey research showing that 80% of respondents have yet to see a tangible impact on enterprise level finances or profitability by adopting Gen AI. And we've seen that too. It's not just the technology, it's really how you apply it and how you manage it. So cool tech doesn't necessarily lead to great ROI, but cool tech can provide very specific use cases with some substantial ROI.
Right.
It's applying it in the right place and how do you do it. So I thought, interesting concepts the way they brought it to light. But the reality is at the end of the day, this is still an emerging technology, and folks need to proceed with caution as these companies are starting to understand how to best implement them.
The article made the point that the companies that will do well with agentic AI are those that have a deep legacy of data. That would be all companies. I don't know too many.
All companies have a lot of data, but they may not have good data. They may have a whole boat
no one
of
has good
data
data either. Let's just let's put everyone in the same bucket there. Okay, final article for you. It's from The Verge, and it's titled "Duolingo Will Replace Contract Workers with AI." So, Michael, I don't know if you've ever used Duolingo. I've tried it. Haven't really made much progress with it. Okay. I could have used it on my trip to Italy a couple weeks ago, but I didn't. The article talks about the CEO recently coming out and saying they're going to be AI first. But at the same time, he's saying this is not about replacing people with AI. Instead, he says the changes are about removing bottlenecks so that employees can focus on creative work and real problems, etc. But clearly, the victim here in their company is going to be the contract workers, which really got my attention because I thought about a lot of places I've been in my past as a consultant, Fortune 500 companies. You walk in, you roam the halls, all you see are contract developers. I mean, they fill up the cubicles, right? So this is an interesting strategy, he's taking, saying, look, we're not going to really go after our employees per se, but we're going to eliminate contract work. So what did you think about this?
So I can understand where they're coming from this. He doesn't really go into depth in terms of which contractors would necessarily be transitioned out and the work that they're doing. That is contractors in general, like all contractors that we're coming for, or are we going to reduce it? But one thing he did mention is they'll gradually stop using contractors that to do work that AI can handle.
Yeah.
Okay, so now if I take that, the world gets a lot smaller. Okay, so AI can handle this type of work, which means that the reality is that they're not going to get rid of all their contractors. They're going to get rid of a bulk of them who may be doing things that AI can support.
Right.
So as you look from a timing perspective, I think the timing is short for folks who are doing repetitive work as contract labor just in general, because AI will replace that kind of activity. But overall, I don't think you're going to be gunning for any humans at this point, with the way that this is being working. So the other thing too is based on their business model, it's quite possible that they may have to alter their business model just internally to support additional types of AI automation as their business model changes. So it's likely that this is perhaps a PR stunt to help them say how AI focused we are, when in fact, in general, they're moving that way anyway, because the rest of the world is too.
Yeah, I would imagine they have a lot of contractors doing development work, and I would think they're probably at risk. But you're right. There's
potentially, but if they're doing vibe coding, the real programmers are probably still going to be just fine.
Very true. All right. Well, hey, Michael, thanks for your time and your perspective on these articles, and thank everyone for joining us on the Pulse Check. Remember, we record and publish another podcast with a tremendous guest every week, so be sure and check that out. And we will see you next time on the Pulse Check. Bye for now.